This week we're going to talk about the bones of the skull, the bony landmarks of the skull, and the muscles of the head, face, and neck. The skull is divided into two divisions, the cranial bones and the facial bones. There are 8 cranial bones for which you will be responsible for knowing the names of. The ethmoid and the sphenoid bones are in the face area, and they're internal to the skull so that you cannot see them. The facial bones, you only need to know that there are 14 facial bones. So here's a picture of the skull. These pink lines represent the suture lines, or the joints of the skull. And this posterior view, you see the occipital bone and the 2 parietal bones. You can see here also just the edges of the temporal bones. In this picture you can also see C1 and C2, so this is the atlas and this is the axis. On this lateral view you can clearly see the temporal bone with its very prominent bony landmarks, the mastoid process and the zygomatic arch. And you can also see the frontal bone. This picture shows the attachment sites for the temporalis muscle in the temporal fossa. You see the attachments for the masseter on the mandible, and along the chin or the ramus of the mandible you have the platysma. Again, this picture shows more of a posterior view, but you have the temporalis, the masseter, and attachments for the occipitofrontalis muscle and the SCM, the sternocleidoid mastoid muscle over here on the mastoid process. This picture shows the temporalis muscle, and again its origin is on the temporal fossa. It dives underneath the zygomatic arch to insert on the choroid process of the mandible. The occipitofrontalis, aponeurotica, that is aponeurosis, that is fascia. So this is all covered with fascia, so its origin is here. Its insertion point is the skin over the eyebrow and on the superior nuchal line on the occiput. This is a 4-bellied muscle. You have 2 in the front and 2 in the back. This picture shows the masseter added and its origin on the zygomatic arch and its insertion on the angle and the ramus of the mandible. In this picture you also see the small occipital muscles. This is a lateral view of the occipital muscles here, and this is the nuchal ligament. This picture shows the platysma. Its origin is on the fascia covering the pectoralis major. So this white right here is the fascia. You can see the clavicle, and it extends up to the base of the mandible and the skin on the lower face. I always call this muscle the muscle of the creature of the Black Lagoon because you can make it stick out by contracting it and widening out at the sides. It's a very superficial muscle. This picture shows the 2 heads of the sternocleidoid mastoid muscle with its one origin on the manubrium here, and the other on 1/3, the first third of the clavicle. And then it has oblique fibers that come up in behind ear and inserts on the mastoid process and the superior nuchal line of the occiput. This picture very clearly shows the anterior endangerment site of the anterior neck, and the border is the trapezius, the clavicle, and the SCM. And in this area you can see there are lots of structures that you need to be careful of when you do massage. You have the brachial plexus here, you have the jugular vein, and there are lots of other structures going through this area, so you do need to be extremely careful when doing massage. This anterior view shows the hyoid muscles. You will be responsible for only knowing that there are suprahyoid muscles and infrahyoid muscles, and it's divided by the hyoid bone. The suprahyoid muscles are above the hyoid and the infrahyoid muscles are below. Here again you see the subclavian vein, the jugular vein, and more of the brachial plexus, so you can see how important it is to be extremely careful when you're massaging the anterior neck. This picture shows scalenes, the anterior, the middle, and the posterior scalenes. And their origin is on the process of C2 through C7, and its insertion is on the first and second ribs. You also see some of the hyoid bones. This is hyoid muscles. This is the ohyoid. And then in here you see the splenius capitis. Again, picture of the hyoids. These are the infrahyoid bone, hyoid muscles. And these are some of the suprahyoid, also with the spinalis capitis and the semispinalis capitis muscles showing here. This is the posterior view of the suboccipitals. These are the 8 small muscles that allow you to tilt and move your head in very fine movements. Again, you only need to know that there are 8 suboccipitals, 4 on each side. This is a lateral view of the ligamentum nuchae, or the nuchal ligament, from the occiput to the spinous process of the vertebra. And here are the 4 suboccipitals. This picture shows the splenius capitis and the splenius cervicis muscles, and you can see how the fibers run obliquely. And again, here's the nuchal ligament as it extends from the occiput down on the spinous process, and it does provide attachment sites along this ligament. You can see how the muscles run very different from the erector muscles, which run along the spine. This here is the occipitofrontalis muscle, the temporalis muscle here. Muscles of the rotator cuff. You remember what they are? Teres major. What is this one? What is this muscle over here? I can't see the insertion point, but you should know this muscle. So these are the muscles that you're going to be responsible for this week: the occipitofrontalis, the temporalis, the masseter, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, scalenes, the platysma, suboccipitals, suprahyoid and infrahyoid muscles.